Hello everyone, in today's video I'm assembling an FFR SC1 chassis for this Revell 1/25th scale 1964 Chevy Impala. This is a build I did for a customer who wanted a ready-to-run chassis for this specific model kit. I'll only be assembling and testing the chassis in this video. No work will be done to the body. Once the chassis was completed, I shipped everything to the customer for him to finish. Although this video might not be as entertaining for some viewers, for those who build these chassis or are interested in doing so, this video will hopefully be helpful. I've already done some videos showing the assembly of an FFR SC1 chassis, but I understand there are people who enjoy the more in-depth build videos like this and want to see more. For anyone waiting for more full builds and project update videos, be sure to be on the lookout for more of those coming soon. To get this build started, I unboxed and had a look at all the parts included with this model kit. This looks like a really neat kit. Not only do the parts look really well molded, but also being a 2-in-1 kit, you get a lot of extra parts. Of course, a lot of these parts aren't really of any interest to me with regards to this build. The body, however, is what I'll be focusing on the most. If you've seen many other builds that I've done that utilize a model car body like this, you'll have seen that some of them have the inner fender and firewall sections molded as a part of the body, but that's not the case with this model. This is nice since it eliminates the need to cut away any sections. It's also a relatively big car with a large trunk area. This gives a lot of room for electronic components to be mounted throughout the vehicle. After getting a good look at this body, I now needed to determine what wheelbase and width will fit this body the best. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for model car bodies like this, so I used this little mock-up chassis that I've shown before to visually determine what size chassis will fit this body best. I make adjustments to it until the wheels are aligned in the wheel wells and the track width appears correct. It's important to make sure that there will be enough room for the suspension to move up and down and for the front wheels to turn. Once everything looks good, I take the measurements of the outer width and wheelbase, as well as the distance between the bottom of the body between the rocker panels, so I'll know what width main chassis piece will fit. After taking those measurements, I print out the chassis parts that will fit. I also make sure that they are compatible with the rear axle that I'll be using, which in this case is a 53mm MA10. If you have a printer, you'll find links to the STL files below in the description. If you don't, I'll include a link to our website where you can order a kit. After each part is printed, I install the over axle piece using two 2x5mm screws. All the necessary hardware sets for the FFR SC1 chassis can be ordered separately if you're printing your own parts. After that, I'm ready to install the rear axle. If you ordered yours as a kit, you'll find an assembly tutorial video in the description. As I've done before, I like to glue a M1.6 washer to the rear-facing side of the chassis panhard bar mount. This helps to give this section a little extra strength, though still be careful not to damage this section. I carefully pressed the ends of the trailing arms onto the axle. Don't forget to use grease, and if you have any issues getting any ball and socket joints together, you can carefully heat up the socket end right before pressing it into place. Since this axle uses a 3-link suspension setup, I installed the upper control arm. A 1x4mm screw for the axle end and a 1x5mm screw for the chassis end, each threaded into the plastic, should work without any worries of them coming loose. But you can also use a longer screw and nut that are also included, as I did here. I then secured the trailing arms to the chassis using 1.6x6mm screws, and I made sure that the axle can move smoothly. Next, I installed the panhard bar using a 1.6x5mm screw on each end. After that, I installed the front suspension and steering assembly. For this build, I'm using a MC01. I'm currently working on an assembly video tutorial for the MS01 and MC01, but written instructions with diagrams can be found on our website. To install it, I started by getting the 4 mounting screws threaded into the assembly and the 1.6mm spacer before securing it to the chassis. Both 1.6x5 and 1.6x6mm screws are provided. Which one you choose depends on the spacer thickness. Here I'm using the 1.6x5 screws. With everything looking good so far, I decided to install the rear piece. To make installing it easier, I drilled out the holes using a 1.1mm drill bit. The 1.2x5mm screws included with the chassis hardware set are for securing this piece. In order to ensure the chassis is the correct size, I mounted a set of wheels. These are not the wheels that I'll be shipping to the customer. I'll be designing a custom set later on, but these are the same size as what I'll be making. Different sizes and variations of wheels are available, as well as an increasing variety of designs. Documentation on how to choose the correct wheels for your project is on our site. Not only do I want to ensure that the wheelbase is correct, but also that the front wheels have enough room to turn without rubbing against the body. This is especially important as this car will be sitting low. While I'm on the subject of wheels, these were the ones sent to me by the customer. I decided to use them to design some similar wheels that would be compatible with this chassis. Fortunately, the design of these is relatively simple. Making wire wheels in the scale that look decent is challenging due to how thin the wires would be in this scale, but using these Pegasus wheels as a guide, I made mine similar but still being able to be 3D printed. We'll be having a look at these finished wheels later on in the video. Since this chassis needs to be ready to run, I made sure I had all the necessary electronics. As many of you are probably aware, I use a Radiolink RC4G transmitter for a lot of my vehicles, especially the smaller scale ones since the receivers that are compatible with it are pretty compact. It's also nice to be able to use one transmitter for up to what I believe is something around 15 or 20 different vehicles. This here is Radiolink's newer version called the RC6GS. One of the reasons I chose this transmitter was because of the 6 channels this receiver and transmitter combo offer, which will be needed for some of the additional modifications the customer wants to make to the vehicle. This transmitter can be powered by AA batteries or by a LiPo battery with a JST connector, which is what I'm using while getting everything set up. After powering on the transmitter, I connected the servo and ESC to the receiver, and the motor and battery to the ESC. I powered on the electronics and binded the receiver to the transmitter. All I needed to do was press a small button on the side of the receiver until the green light indicated the receiver was bound to that transmitter. Links to all the electronics I used will be in the description. After giving all the components a quick test, I installed the steering servo and mounted the N20 motor and gear assembly. I made sure to cut the servo link to the correct size and test fit the ends before gluing. With the motor in place, I did a rough measurement to figure out how long the drive shaft would need to be. I then transferred that measurement over to a 2mm stainless steel rod and cut it to that length. After that, I test fit it with the drive shaft ends in place. I gradually reduced the length until it was the correct size. I also made sure that there was a little wiggle room for when the axle moves up and down. Once it was the correct length, I glued on each end. Since the customer was going to do some additional work to this car, I didn't want to make the placement of the electronics permanent, so I just used some tape to get everything secured so I could take it for a quick test drive. Velcro and double-sided tape work very well for mounting these electronics. Although it's a little messy looking, this chassis is ready to drive. Speed was not the goal for this car, instead smooth driving at lower speeds is what's wanted. This 2000 RPM N20 motor does a great job of producing plenty of torque to keep the car driving smooth even at low speeds. Before concluding the chassis build, it's finally time to install the custom designed wheels. Although as I mentioned before, it's really hard to get a super authentic looking wire wheel that can be printed in this size, the end result looks pretty close to the Pegasus wheels sent to me. I think after a few coats of paint and maybe a black wash, these wheels would look awesome. One bonus was that the tires on the Pegasus wheels can actually fit these wheels as well. As tempting as it was to mount the body, lay down some paint, and do some cruising, it was time to send this chassis and model kit on its way to the customer for him to complete. I hope this video was informative to any builders out there. Feel free to leave any questions you have below in the comments, or send us a message on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or by email. I do the best I can to answer as many questions on YouTube as possible, but it's hard to get to all of them, especially on older videos, so feel free to send us a message. Also, let me know if you want to see more in-depth builds and customer projects like this. I don't generally film this work, not only to save time, but I also assume that these are probably not as entertaining as a complete build video with a painted driving car at the end, but since I'm not quite ready with some of the other build videos I've got coming soon, I figured this would be a nice way to bridge the gap between uploads. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out the previous video I uploaded showcasing some awesome Scale 3D RC 3D printable crawler bodies and get yourself entered into the giveaway. Also, if you're in the mood to see another build like this, I highly recommend checking out the full build video of this 83 Camaro Z28 if you have not already. That build uses the same chassis seen here, but with more custom work and a full interior. If you like this video, I think you'll really enjoy that one as well. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.